please, could you introduce yourself and tell us about, the subjects that you teach?
My name is Ms Paraminder. I teach in primary. At the moment I'm in grade 3 and I've taught in kind of 3, 4 and 5. And because I'm a primary teacher, I'm kind of responsible for, English, maths, science, unit, history, geography. Basically, you name it, I do it. Except for like PE and mother tongue and library and music. But all the rest is kind of on me.
No PE?
No PE. Not at this school. When I used to teach in other schools, I have been responsible for PE as well.
As well?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite fun.
You're quite, we get into the background of the martial arts a bit later on, but okay, so what do you love most about teaching?
I think that every day is genuinely different. Like, you never know what's going to happen, teaching during a power cut, or where, the internet isn't working, or something happens and then it affects. And I kind of like that on the spot kind of problem solving. I also like that you get to see the kids' triumphs, and particularly when something's been difficult for them and then they finally make this breakthrough, and it's really nice to be there for that. But I also love seeing the other side of the kids, the non-academic side, what kind of jokes do they like? And kind of encouraging that side of them as well, trying to make them like really, really well-rounded. But also I wasn't the greatest student at school myself. And I think sometimes those kids that find it hard to be social, or find it hard to understand a concept in maths, or just need a bit more time for stuff because they're anxious, I feel like I didn't have those things growing up, whereas I feel like I'm better at spotting that, and sometimes that's what a kid needs from you. They don't necessarily need you to teach them how to spell something or their times tables, but they need you to help them learn to regulate their own emotions, or to understand that they feel a bit anxious and that's okay, and they can do this and this and this to help them. I guess I like all aspects of my job, except for report writing. I say that's the only thing I don't enjoy. But all the other stuff is, there are so many different things to my job, it's like, sometimes you're a nurse, sometimes you're a counsellor, sometimes you're a teacher, but there's loads of other stuff to it too, which I think is what keeps it different every single year.
Okay, that's lovely. Can you share with us like a memorable moment in your teaching career?
Well, there's been a lot, because this is my 20th year of teaching. But one that sticks out in my mind here is I was really annoyed with the kids because they hadn't been as principled as I know that they could be. And they had been perhaps slightly disrespectful to a specialist or something like that. I can't remember the actual context of it. And we'd also been reading Percy Jackson. And they were really into Percy Jackson. So they knew about Greek myths and Zeus and Poseidon. So they knew all of these things. And over the course of me kind of having a conversation with them about their choices, the clouds started to darken. And the clouds started to gather, and you could really sense a storm was coming, and a storm had been predicted for that day. And I think right at the height of my irritation and real you guys have not done the right thing, I really think we can do better, we need to reflect, there was a giant clap of thunder and some lightning, and then the fire alarm went off, and all of the kids were like, she's a daughter of Zeus, we can't mess with her. And it was hilarious because they didn't speak. They were just stunned into silence. They knew that couldn't be true, but there was a bit of them that were like, okay, maybe she is magical. And it was really, really funny.
They weren't sure.
Because I just went along with it. But that was a good moment. But there's loads of things like that. I think those are the things that stick out for you. It's never the, always the teaching moments, it's the other kind of in between, or residentials. There was a kid, I don't know if you should use this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, who, one of my favourite students, just a wonderful kid. She came in speaking very little English, none, and she was a Portuguese speaker. And I had another kid that was also a Portuguese speaker, and she'd been at the school for a year. We went off to residential, and the kid that had been at school for a year, we'll call her Lily, that's not her name. Lily comes to me and she says, Miss, this other kid, we'll call her Marie. Marie says she's going to run away. And I was like, oh, I'm like, bring her. So she comes. And Lily's like, I brought her, and I was like, good. So I said, Marie, I hear you're going to run away. And Lily's like, I'm like, translate. And she did. And Marie's like, yeah, I'm going to run away. I'm like, okay. Do you know where you are? Translate. And Marie's like, no. Okay. Do you know where you live? Translate. Marie's like, no. Do you have any money? Marie's like, no. So I was like, and Marie's like, no, I'm going to bed now. Good night, Miss Sanger. But it's fun things like that. You know, residential is always a really, really fun time. You see the kids grow in such an amazing way. You know, the kids that are scared of the water get in the water. The kids that are scared of climbing, they climb. You know, kids that are really worried about sharing a room with someone else, they can do it. Or they try something new to eat that they've never eaten before. And I kind of really like that.
That's really sweet.
But I'm really glad that now in PYP we don't go at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, you're going to residentials quite soon, isn't it? So you're looking forward to that?
2 weeks. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Hopefully the weather will be good, because where we go is lovely. It's like beach. I mean, on the sunny day, like you could be in the south of France. Like that's what it feels like, and it is fun. And you can be a bit more relaxed, and the kids are relaxed, and because we're going through kind of the things that you know, what might happen in residential, and it always surprises me the things that they're worried about. And at the moment, some of them are a little bit nervous about the dark. Some of them have never been on a sleepover ever anywhere in their lives, so that's like a big deal for them. And then there's the other ones, you know, like I get a bit of car sickness, or I've never shared a room with someone that isn't my family, and it's just, I think it's quite a privileged position to be in, to help them through those moments, because they trust you and they'll tell you really quite personal things, you know, and they trust you that you won't tell anyone, but you'll kind of discreetly help them. But yeah, I do really like it's stressful, because obviously you're responsible for all these children, but it is really fun as well. And what I always like is when you kind of talk to them the next year, they will flag residential as being a really, really fun thing that they did and something that they remember. And yeah, it's a good laugh.
That's cool. Okay, just to finish off this first part, what advice would you give to students? And that can be like literally anything that you think about, like if they're coming into school, or if those are the moments that you mentioned earlier, the students maybe struggle with maths or with something like that, they need to regulate their emotions, or maybe even on that day that you're quite annoyed. Like what just share any advice.
I think that they do need to trust themselves, and there's nothing that the teaching staff haven't seen before, like collectively. Like, you cannot surprise us, you cannot shock us. So just be honest and relax and trust us, and we will trust you, kind of thing. I guess it's a cliche, but it's true, right? It's just be yourself, you know? Because I think it's really funny to watch kids go through school, and there's a lot of trying to conform or be like others. And they spend a lot of time in school trying to be like everybody else. And then you try and get into university, and you don't get into university by being like everybody else. You have to stand out and be different. Yet they've spent many years conforming, trying to be like other people. Like, just remember who you are. And you're in a safe space, particularly in a school like this, where we have every kind of human, you know, and that person is welcome and happy here. There's a space for you here. So don't be other people, be you, because that's how you're going to get ahead in life. You don't get a job by being just like everybody else, and you're not going to get into university just being like everybody else. So you do you.
That's lovely. That's really, really good advice. Be you. Thank you for that. Now we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty of who Ms Paraminder is. So can you tell us a bit about like your background and how you got into teaching?
My mum is a teacher. My granddad was a teacher. My aunts and uncles are teacher. My cousins are teachers. I didn't want to be a teacher, because for me it was like, yeah, I don't want that. And I did a whole bunch of other jobs. And what I realised was the thing I liked about those jobs was teaching others. Okay. So then when I realised that, I was like, okay, I have to bite the bullet and I have to go do my teaching.
What other jobs?
So for many years I worked in retail.
Okay.
And I kind of like the public, well, mostly like the public facing kind of element of it. I also used to work. I used to work for American Airlines.
For what?
I used to do check-in at American Airlines for a long, long time.
Wow.
And that was really fun. But
I cannot picture you in that uniform.
It was too much polyester. And this trouser option was so awful that even I wore a skirt to work every day.
Wow.
But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about people and how that, 99% of people are good and kind and loving. And sometimes you might see them on a bad day and they'll always apologise, for their behaviour. So I think it taught me a lot about people. But what I did like about it was helping others and teaching others. So I was like, okay, well, you should go back and do your teaching kind of qualification. So I did. And then I taught for a couple of years locally. I used to teach in Ealing, in the same town as my mum, and my mum was still a teacher at the time, and she was trying to convince me to teach at her school, and I was like, no way, absolutely not. So I taught at a different school, and again, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about people. It taught me about my own community, because I taught in an area where there was a lot of Indian and Pakistani people, and it felt good to be able to help my own community, because there were a lot of people who'd come in whose kids spoke English, but their parents didn't. So it was kind of nice to be able to help not just the children, but also the parents sometimes when they kind of needed that support. And I think growing up, I didn't have many teachers that were brown. So I think it's nice to then go into a career where your staff kind of reflects the community, because I have taught in places where that isn't the case. I'm from an immigrant family. My grandparents and parents moved here in the 50s and the 60s. And my granddad, on my dad's side, he was a headmaster, he was a teacher. And when he came here, they didn't recognise his teaching qualification. And he's like, okay, fine. So he did a whole bunch of other jobs, many of them that weren't what he was trained to do, but he did them with a smile on his face, knowing that, his kids and grandkids would be better off because of the change that he had made. And largely, we owe a lot to him. But it was really nice, because kind of towards at the end of his life, he wasn't very well, and he wasn't always kind of lucid. He didn't always know that you were there. But I remember the last conversation I had with him, he remembered who I was and where I was, and that I was a teacher. So it was a really nice full circle moment. And I think he felt proud that he couldn't do what he wanted to do here, but his kids and his grandkids did. So that was kind of really nice. So I guess it wasn't always my intention, but it definitely is a job that I really like to do. And I've taught in the state system, I've taught in an IB system, and I prefer the IB system. I like the way we teach, I like the autonomy that we have, I like that you can change your programme, subtly to suit your students. We're doing a unit about explorers coming up, and every year it's slightly different, because the resources I use will reflect the kids in my class, and it's really nice to be able to do that and have that freedom. And I think it's nice when kids feel seen as well, because it's nice because they have a sense of joy and they feel connected and they feel like, I'm a part of this too. I guess I started off as a state school teacher here, and then I took a job in Norway because I wanted something different. So that's where I got into IB teaching, and that was really, really fun. It was quite challenging. It was a very different way of life.
How long were you in Norway for?
7 years.
Quite a while.
I think I really like winter. I've always liked winter, but that solidified it. But 6 months of winter is a very long time. So that was really fun. And then I moved back, and it was fortunate that there was a job opening here, because there aren't that many IB schools in London. And I think I did, sometimes the universe gives you a push, or things fall into place and it feels like, okay, that's the right. Because at the time you're thinking, actually, why have I left? And then you realise, why.
You're like, oh, that's why.
Yeah, and I think that was quite a nice kind of feeling. And it was nice to be kind of near a family again, because, I'm fairly local to this area. So that was a nice moment. And I guess I'm happy here. There's been a lot of change at ISL in the time that I've been here. And we're a very different school than we were when I first started, and it's really interesting to see the changes and how the school's grown and changed and evolved, and it's been kind of really cool to be on that journey. And for me personally, it's nice to be able to teach, in grade 3 and grade 4 and grade 5. I very much like grade 3. I didn't think that I would, be a good grade 3 teacher, but I do enjoy it. There's such a sense of joy about the world, which reminds you that that's why we're here and that's why we do it.
So is that why you prefer that age grade?
They're a little bit, how do I put it? They just feel and they just do. They're not so worried about what other people think. And I think sometimes as we get older, we kind of develop those filters where we're a bit concerned about what other people might say or do or think of us. Whereas grade 3 aren't there yet. And I kind of like that. And sometimes they remind me that I don't really need to worry about what other people think, or, that you should be making your choices for yourself.
That's really interesting how you describe the whole teaching career. So I suppose my next question comes back to a little bit what you saying in the beginning. You said your parents were teachers and you didn't want to do that. Can you talk about your teaching philosophy? Because you mentioned also like catering your teaching to your kids, which is not always possible or viable. But the IB said the IB allows you to do that. So yeah, can you tell us a bit about your teaching philosophy and how you implement that in your classroom?
I think everyone's different. They all have different needs. And I think you want to try and make as many kids feel as comfortable as possible. I try not to have like fixed seating. Like if kids are working, I don't really mind. Like some of them do like to sit at a desk, some like to stand and lean. Some of them want to sit on the carpet with something on their lap. Just giving them different opportunities to work in their way, at their pace, and then they can do a better job. But not making it out like, oh, you need this and you need this. Kids are smart, like they know what they need and what doesn't work for them. And just giving them the space to experiment with, which you can do in primary, right? Because you've got a little bit more time in that way, and that they're with me all the time. That if they get to middle school by knowing, okay, for me to learn effectively, I need this and this and this, it's better that they learn that for themselves than me telling them this is what you need. Like they're smart, they're intuitive, they can work those things out. And just giving them like the time and space to figure out a little bit who they are and what they want. And then obviously there are children that do have very specific needs and being able to cater to them. And it's small things like making sure that you use a font like Century Gothic so it doesn't have the curly A, because there are some children that find that difficult to read. Or when you've put something on a screen that it's not white on, it's not black font on white, then it's black font on light blue or green or yellow, because it's easier to read. That then becomes easier for everyone, just
details.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that, but also I guess I'm not super top down. Like it is a conversation. There are definitely decisions we come to together as a class. Yeah, there are some things they have to do because we have to do them. But like sometimes a kid will be like, oh, so you've asked me to do this assignment. Can I do it like this? And sometimes there's room for that negotiation. Like, well, actually, I don't need you to write it. You could do that as a play. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Like if it's a very discrete literacy task, then I might say, well, no, we do need to have a written component to this because it's come from, an English lesson. But if it's an art lesson or a unit lesson, there's scope for kind of flexibility. Like sometimes, this is something that I've noticed in the last 4 or 5 years, sometimes children are reluctant to draw because they perceive themselves as not being good at it. So if you've got a task that's a drawing task, some of them might find that kind of challenging or hard or a bit confronting. And some of them might come up with an alternative, like, well, could I use shapes rather than, to make it more abstract rather than more like realistic? And if they give you like their reasoning behind it, and if it still fulfills the task, then why not let them do it that way? I'm not saying I'll always let them do what they want, but if they can get a way to make it fit, then we can kind of have that kind of conversation.
Finding different ways to reflect as well, right? Some of them might want to make a video to explain what they understood.
Exactly. I mean, Seesaw's a really classic example. I always say if you've put something on Seesaw, it needs to have a comment. It needs to have some kind of explanation, because you're in the classroom, your parents not, they don't know what you did or what that is. So you need to explain it. And a lot of them will go with just a standard little text. But there are some that are like, can I do this as a voice memo? It's like, of course, because that still fulfills what I want you to do. I don't mind how you do it, but I always make them practice first, because so they had a go at so they'll do what I want them to do sometimes. And sometimes there's the illusion of choice, where it's like, yeah, you can do this or this, but it's 2 maths tasks, so you're still doing maths. You think you've won, but really you're still doing maths, which I wanted you to do, and I think if you're constantly telling people what to do, that's not how life is. And certainly when you go into a university situation or a work situation, it is collaboration, that's how the world works.
Yeah, that's really good. Like when you were saying all of these things, I kind of like was taken back to a conversation we had when you were telling me about this unit that you created. What kind of smart are you? Can you talk to our viewers a little bit about that?
That's a really old unit actually. They had to, they were kind of like, they were trying to figure out like what their kind of strengths were really, and I think some of them realised that they were quite comfortable and happy like talking to people, or they had a really good with spatial awareness, so that they needed things that were practical and more like kinesthetic. And then you've got the kids that really like the nitty-gritty, that want everything organised. The kids that will go up putting everything in Excel spreadsheets. We need those people, and the sooner they figure out who they are, like the better for the rest of us, because I'm not an Excel person, but I need Excel people in my life, It's even small things like, and this sounds really silly, but I teach them how to plan. Like if you're doing like a task, what are your tasks? Who is responsible for them? And then like, well, what's the time frame for it? And you might give them a bunch of different ways to organise that, and they decide how they want to do it. I still get what I want at the end of the day, but the kid feels that they have a level of control and they find a tool that works for them. And then they can kind of, take those things forward. There are some that realise that they need sound. Like I've realised this, that you need kind of like almost white noise in the background, and there are some kids that can't cope with that and don't need that. So we have, ear defenders. All the kids have like a set of headphones, and sometimes they've put the headphones on because it's just an indicator that please don't come and talk to me. There's nothing going on there, but it's like they've already worked that out, and that's what they need, and just learning those sorts of things about themselves. And that's really fun to watch when they realise that, and I think that's a really powerful tool. And then if they can figure those things out in grade 3, it helps them in grade 4 and grade 5, and then by the time they're in MIP, they're really self-aware and they have a set of organisational skills that's really hard to learn in middle school, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, what do you think in terms of like progression? Like they go through with you, and then they learn all these things like about themselves, and then they get to maybe middle school, and everything is a little different. So how do you explain to them that they have to sort of like learn how to communicate their needs as well, to be able to continue with what works for them?
Really, the advocating for yourself. Because sometimes you do, and helping them practice. Like, what might I advocate for myself for? Like, if a kid's pushing in front of you in the line, it's okay to say, please stop. I'm here, you need to line up behind me, that kind of stuff. We actually practice that. Like, how do I say it? What are the actual words? Do little bits of role play, because some people that comes naturally, but there's a lot of kids that it doesn't come naturally to at all. And sometimes I'll have, you've given different kids different setups, and every once in a while you'll forget what what you've agreed for that kid, and they'll come to you and be like, but I need my this and my that and all of this, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right, why don't you just go get it? So it's making them, I think, a little bit more independent. I used to really like teaching in grade 5 when you do exhibition, because you get to a point in the year where you're just their PA. They'll send you an email and be like, that thing we talked about, can you print this out? So the next day it'll be like, did you print that out yet? Or remember that thing that you said you were going to do, have you done it? And it's quite funny, because you go from being teacher to facilitator, which is what you want, but it is a really funny kind of shift, and it changes, like, I guess, your relationship with them, but it also changes them moving forward, because I always find that after exhibition they're like so grown up. I know that then that changes in middle school, because you go from the top to like being the youngest again, and I think that changes how they feel about themselves and the new space they have to navigate. But my goal is always like, be organised. I will help you to be organised. These are the things we can do to be organised, because if you can manage yourself, then you can manage that big change, because it is a big change. And I think a lot of our kids forget that just because we're in the same building, we're not technically, it's a separate school, the middle school, and I think they forget that. Yeah.
For sure. And yeah, with the change, and you know, it's good to everything that you explained on how learning how to organize yourself and how to communicate, how to tell others kindly what your needs are.
Yeah,
I think that's part of growing up, and it's very good that they have you too.
I think they see a lot of like my organisational techniques. Like I use a lot of alarms, and after 2 weeks they're like, oh, that's your register alarm, do the register, or oh, that means this, you need to do that. Like they're very quick, and so then obviously those things they can replicate at home. But yeah,
that's really cute. Okay, so my next question is, are there any like innovative teaching practices or technologies that you use in your classroom?
I guess we try and integrate as much new stuff as we can, because you're not like it's hard, right? Because you're teaching children for a future that you don't know what it's going to look like. I think it's having as many transferable skills as possible and things they can adapt for other situations. And I think COVID as well taught us quite a lot, that you never really know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
And if you have as many ways to be independent and to communicate, and I guess the well-being side's also kind of come into this now as well, hasn't it? Because that suffered during that COVID kind of period. I guess I try and think about how can we be adaptable? How can you adapt yourself to any situation? It's a bit like, sounds weird, I really love it when something goes wrong, you know?
Please do explain.
Or like a kid does something and you're watching them and you're like, okay, this design isn't going to work, but I'm not going to tell them that, you know? And so you let them go through it, and at some point they're like, this isn't going to work. And they'll come to you and they'll say, I have a big problem. And I was like, okay, what's the big problem? And they'll tell you. And I was like, okay, but is that fixable? And they're like, yeah, because I can do this and this and this. I'm like, okay, so is it a big problem? And they're like, actually, no, it isn't. So I'm like, go and fix it. But that kind of, they still kind of need that feedback, I think, from you. They aren't quite there yet with that. But that sort of thing. But nothing is really too big a problem to ever be fixed, you know? Like, we're okay. Sun's still going to rise tomorrow. Like, you're fine.
We're going to get through this.
Yeah, and occasionally inside I'm like, okay, yeah, that is a slightly bigger problem. And, yeah, but they don't need to know that. Like, I think knowing that there's always going to be people to help them, and that they're not by themselves, and you can always bounce something off somebody else. I think those sort of things are quite important, and I think some of them realising that they need to ask for help is really important. You know?
Yeah, asking for help is not something that comes naturally as well for some people.
No.
Some people just want to try and get it, do everything themselves.
The kids are like, no, don't touch this, I'll do it all by myself. But that's not the goal here. You do have to interact with others. And I think I also am aware that there are students that put themselves out there by working in a group because it isn't their thing. Equally, then they need time to not work with a group and do their own thing and be in complete control of everything. You know, it's finding that kind of balance for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like a ringmaster, you know? You got lots of plates in the air kind of thing.
For sure. Okay, now just my final question. It's a personal one. Can you tell us a bit about your interests and hobbies outside of teaching? We did give a hint in the beginning of this interview.
I really like being outside. I think it definitely affects my mood. That's something I think I learnt living in Norway. If you were in a bad mood, if you went outside for like half an hour, you'd feel so much better. So I do like being kind of near green spaces. I like to be active, you know. I like to walk and hike, play tennis, swimming. Don't like swimming, but it's good for me and I should do it. And I actually made a deal with my class that if they didn't moan about swimming and they swam every week, I would as well. but they can't tell me to swim if they didn't go swimming, if that makes sense. So it's a kind of keeping each other honest type thing. So we go swimming on Monday, the class does, so I have to go swimming at the weekend. So I can say, well, I went swimming, you have to go swimming. So we're using that. My dad is was a taekwondo instructor, and he did that for most of like my childhood and adult life, really. That was his job. And so we got into that quite young. I would imagine that's probably where the teaching came from as well, because you know you're with your dad for the whole 5-hour lesson, so yeah, he's going to get you to do some teaching. So I did that for a really, really long time, like 20 years. You know, kind of we stopped around COVID. It was like a natural kind of break in that. But I really like doing taekwondo. I think it taught me a lot. It gives you a lot of self-confidence. It teaches you discipline. If you work hard at something, you get better. You know, and that there's no substitute for hard work. He used to say that the harder you work, like the harder you train, the luckier you get. You know, he didn't really believe in luck. He believed that you made your own luck by working hard and practicing. And I think that's a really nice thing. It's almost like mindful, isn't it, to practice something over and over and over again to get good at it. But it's also a really good way of just calming yourself down. It was a really fun way. Like me and my dad are really tight, so that is because of that, because we spent so much time together. It allowed us to travel quite a lot because we competed abroad, so that was really fun. And it kind of, like, I was a third Dan from the age of about 14, so
oh, wow.
It gives you quite a lot of a sense of your own authority, not in a way that you would, you wouldn't lord it over other people, but there was a sense of people respected your rank even if they were much older than you. And I think that was a really interesting learning experience, that sometimes you were in charge of, you know, as an 18-year-old of 50-year-old men who had to listen to you because, you know, you were a senior rank to them. But also I think you earn that respect by, you know, making good choices, leading by example. I think that's what I learned really from taekwondo, is you should never ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. And, you know, to lead by example. You do it first and you set the tone and the other people will follow you. But also it was really fun. Like, I made loads of friends, many of whom are still in my life today. Like, we all kind of grew up together because one of the places that we did our lessons was my primary school. So that was really, really fun. So my dad ended up with a situation where like half of my class and half of my brother's class were in his taekwondo lesson. So it was very nice and kind of social. I think my mum didn't love it so much because she got like dragged into it too, but not necessarily because she wanted to. But that was what my dad did his entire kind of life. So that was, yeah, and I guess an unusual choice for, you know, an Indian family.
That's really lovely. Well, I've really enjoyed learning more about you. I'm sure our listeners will too. So thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing. And lovely to hear about like all your teaching practices and philosophy of life that you bring to the students.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.